Hi, I'm Darrin Peppard. Welcome to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, the podcast dedicated to today's hardworking leader. Join me every Sunday for leadership insight, inspiration, and a little pep talk to keep you rolling down your road to awesome. Hello and welcome, my friends, into episode 63 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Today, we're going to talk about mental health. And we're going to do that with my friend, Maria Barrera. Maria is the founder of Clayful, which is a company that's on a mission to help kids build the skills and the resilience necessary to tackle anything that comes their way. Throughout Maria's career in education, technology, and human resources, she has always been focused on solving big problems in complex systems. And now she's tackling the biggest problem of all, the mental health crisis. Maria's dedication to helping others is rooted in her own experience. She ran her first coaching session when she was just 15 years old and has always found joy in coaching others through life's everyday stressors and challenges. Her passion for education led her to start a tutoring company while getting her engineering degrees at Stanford University and to working with thousands of districts as a founding member of the team at Nearpod. With Clayful, Maria is bringing together education, technology, and healthcare in a way that is helping kids improve their mental wellness, regardless of their socio-economic status. I had an amazing conversation recently with Maria, and you're going to hear that right on the other side of these messages, including a word from our sponsor, Peer Driven PD. I'll see you on the other side. Hey leaders, how often do you hear from certain teachers that PD just doesn't feel relevant to them? If you need a professional development solution that offers differentiated PD that will cater to the unique needs of your teachers, I've got the answer. Peer-driven PD seeks out some of the best teachers in the country, documents their tips and techniques that work in real classrooms every day, and provide that content directly to schools. That's right, your teachers can learn from other full-time classroom teachers that are in the trenches, just like your staff. And the great thing is, Peer-driven PD features a wide range of material from all levels and content areas. This means instant credibility with some of your most reluctant educators. And the courses are really engaging. Things like project-based learning at early elementary, building student agency with meaningful projects for secondary teachers, getting students unstuck in math, and so many more. And just released this fall, a series of classroom management essentials for early elementary, upper elementary, and secondary teachers, all taught by phenomenal full-time classroom teachers. Imagine the morale boost for your teachers when they see themselves and their day-to-day challenges reflected and addressed in their professional development. If you'd like to hear more, reach out to peerdrivenpd.com. Tell them the Leaning into Leadership podcast sent you, and they'll give you a free trial access so you can check out all of their content and decide for yourself. Again, that's peerdrivenpd.com.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get on to the episode.
So one of the largest challenges that schools are faced with right now is managing the mental health needs of their staff and of their students. Today on the show, my guest is Maria Barrera, and we're going to talk exactly about that. We're going to get into some conversations around mental health needs, both at the adult and the student level, some ways that those things could be managed, a really awesome new company that Maria has founded in Clayful. But before we get to that, let's do this. Maria, welcome into the Leaning into Leadership podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So before we dive in, just really quick, Maria, tell my listeners a little bit about you. A little bit of your journey, a little bit of, what you're currently doing, that kind of stuff, just to give them some information.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'm Maria, the founder and CEO. We started Clayful about a year ago, and I've spent my whole career in education and technology. I think that there's so much that educators do on a day-to-day basis, and so much that students need and continue to benefit from with technology. So I was an early team member at Nearpod, where we, I believe really changed the face of instruction with technology, and has been, that was an incredible journey. And now we're aiming to do that with Clayful. So we're bringing, humans and technology together to help address the mental health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's rewind a little bit. Let's go a little bit back into you and I before we hit record. We're talking about some of your background, and it's I love what you guys are doing at Clayful. I'm excited about the product and about what's available out there for for my fellow school administrators who are battling that. You and I were talking a little bit before we hit record also about having opportunities and money and all this kind of stuff to hire counselors. I tried to do that as a superintendent. All the money in the world doesn't matter if the people aren't there. So I love what you guys are doing there, but I want to go back in time a little bit further. And I just have to ask this. So how does an individual with a master's in mechanical engineering end up developing a program, and for that matter, developing a company focused on supporting the mental health needs of teenagers? Help me with that a little bit.
That's a very good question. So, okay, I'm going to tell you, I, as we were talking about earlier, like I get really inspired by pieces of media. One of the ones that comes to mind because of that question is the Steve Jobs 2005 commencement speech at Stanford. He talks about the importance of connecting the dots, and that you can't really connect the dots looking forward. You can really only do that looking backward. And that's actually an exercise that we do now at the company. Whenever during our company retreats, we have team members sort of look at all the different dots that have connected them, that have gotten them to where they are today, which is, joining this new company. For me, there's a couple dots that come to mind. I'm going to take you way, way, way back to literally when I came to the U.S.
Awesome.
When I was 10, I came with my mom from Colombia, and my parents have been divorced since I was 2. I grew up with my mom, and both of them had very interesting childhoods, and that, of course, framed and shaped like my own childhood. And I've learned a lot about like their mental health journey and the importance of getting support since you're, while you're young, to be able to, undo generational trauma and ensure that we are being the most intentional with your actions and words, especially when, raising kids. Some of that I learned the hard way, when like we were going through things as a family, and then other things where, I was able to like really reflect based on the things that they've shared as they've gone through their own mental health journey. So I feel like there's always been an aspect of that piece. And actually the name Clayful came from that. It came from a conversation with my dad, and the idea that, we're all made of clay. Everything that happens to us shapes us in some way, shape, or form. And ideally, as a company, we're able to now give kids the tools to be able to reshape that to who they want to be, and as well as be one of those tools. So that's like a big dot, and it's informed a lot of like my own mental health journey. The second one really is around, when I was in high school, middle school, and the things that I saw around me, right? I had friends who were deeply struggling. I had friends whose parents were deeply struggling. I was a rebel and needed some support myself. So a lot of the like what we're doing now is also like, what do I wish I had? What do I wish I had access to when I was younger? And like, how do I build something for like, the young Maria that needed more support than she knew at the time, and that her like parents knew she needed at the time. And then we start seeing that like, okay, I loved tutoring. I loved working with kids. I always thought it was because I wanted to be a teacher, like a math teacher at some point. But it was really because I was working with these middle school and high schoolers, teaching them, trigonometry, but really talking about the pressures that we're facing. And it was like, oh, well, my parents are putting a lot of pressure on me to get straight A's, or I am really struggling with this, say, with my friend group. And, looking back on it now, I'm like, wait, I was like tutoring and coaching at the same time. Like this is starting to make sense. And then, of course, like all of the experiences at Nearpod and trying to understand, like, how do we build a product that students love, teachers want to use, and have time to use, right? And administrators can pay for all in one. I would say, that's a lot of ed tech companies haven't necessarily figured all those pieces out. And I'm really proud of what we did at Nearpod for that. So that's definitely informs a lot of how we work with schools today, and is a big dot that connects us to where we are today.
Right.
And then the last one is really what the work that I did as the pandemic was unfolding was really, it was in the HR space. And I saw the needs, like how HR was investing so much in employee mental health, and all of these companies that were doubling, tripling, and their offerings as much as they like trying to keep up with the demand. But I didn't see much for kids. So big stuff on the adult side. And, it's really exciting that we've been able to find some really innovative models, both on the tech side as well as on the financial side, because like a lot of companies are paying for it. But I didn't see a lot for kids. And as we saw, like the pandemic had, accelerated a lot of the mental health issues that kids have been experiencing. And that's really, that article I told you about the rising suicide rates in 8-year-olds, like that's the one that ended up truly, being the catalyst that said like, oh, you studied mechanical engineering. You thought you were going to build airplanes. You decided that you wanted to take that and build, tech products instead. And now you can sort of take that experience and turn it into something completely different. Again, connecting a lot of these dots that you really care about and can have impact on. So that was the conversation I had with myself at like 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night.
Just a random Tuesday, right?
Yeah, just a random Tuesday.
Holy cow, there's so much there I want to unpack. First, here's what I want to go at first. One of my favorite quotes from a gentleman named Rory Vaden. Rory says that we are uniquely positioned to help the person that we once were. And I think it's really interesting how what you're doing right now, that you reflected that back on, young Maria and the needs that young Maria had. I think one of the biggest challenges, and I want you to maybe address this a little bit, the best that you can, but I think one of the challenges that sometimes we have in the mental health space with our younger individuals, with our kids, whether that's inside of a school or outside of a school, one of the biggest challenges is finding a way to provide those supports from somebody who can actually relate with the kid, right? So maybe talk a little bit about that. I mean, both maybe your experience, and then maybe some things you guys have done at Clayful to address that. I know you have, so I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, as I talk to clinical therapists, they always tell me like therapy is not built for kids, right? Like there's so many aspects of it where you're like, you're going to show up here at Tuesday at 5 p.m. and like talk about your feelings. And it's like, what if at Tuesday at 5 p.m. they're just like, they want to go play soccer or like play video games. Like, you have to get into a mind space in a way that, it's not necessarily conducive to that conversation. But like, I talked a little bit about young Maria, like when I was really struggling, like whether it's like identity crisis, coming from Colombia and like not being Colombian, not being American, like it's just like, I'm in this weird limbo and I'm like trying to figure out like my independence, but like with a very overbearing mother. She, bless her heart, tried to help, got me a therapist, very kind 60-year-old German man. I'm like, we don't have a lot in common. Surprise.
Yeah, you guys probably didn't have a ton in common, did you?
No. And it was this like, I mean, we had 2 sessions and like got nothing out of it. And it was really frustrating for my mom and really frustrating for me. And, I think about that a lot now. And as we hire and train coaches, we're always looking for people who have shared life experience and can speak to the things and can have lived with the things that kids are struggling with now, right? So whether that's, 15% or 18% of psychologists are BIPOC, Clayful is 80%. Like we're really investing a lot in bringing in diversity to our coaching base because, I mean, like this happens in education as well, right? That's actually one of the reasons at Nearpod we acquired vocabulary because we wanted to see kids represented in instruction. This is the same way for mental health. We want to see kids represented in the care that they're getting. So that's a big part of it. We also meet kids where they're at, right? So we're not asking them to show up at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, but rather it's on demand, right? So we teach them, it's like, hey, here's the things you might want to talk about. You're stressed about a test. You had a fight with your best friend. You saw something that someone posted about you on social media that you want to talk about. Like all these things are, realities of day to day, instead of getting in a fight with that friend or, getting upset and self-harming. Like there's other avenues. And like one of those is to talk to Clayful. So we teach them like, here's the, when you have an itch, here's how you can scratch it. And it's like, I think there's so much power in that because then they start to learn like, oh, there's different tools that I can pull from my toolkit when I feel a certain way and start to like recognize emotions and self-regulate. So I'm really excited about that in particular because I think that it helps kids build a ton of capacity. And we're also all text-based. So we're meeting kids where they're at. We know that, a lot of kids are not proud of their home. They don't want to Zoom. Bandwidth issues are still very, very, very prevalent regardless of all the investments that came in during COVID, right? There's still, access is still a big issue. So we're really trying to make it as accessible and like frictionless as possible. And a lot of kids also just will text before they can talk, right? It's hard to articulate feelings and it's hard to say things out loud. So I think a lot of those pieces are so key to, I think, like our success thus far and like being able to keep the student at the center. Maybe it's because I'm like, hey, what would Maria have wanted? But also because we're listening to students and talking to teachers and talking to parents consistently to really build for them.
Leaders, your educators deserve to have a leader who believes in them, who supports them, and who lifts them up when they're down. Right now, they deserve that reminder that they are traveling their own road to awesome. On that road to awesome, we focus on the things we can control and we let go of the things we can't. On that road to awesome, we rise by lifting others, not by pushing each other down. And on that road to awesome, we change the world one conversation at a time. Leaders, I want to work with your schools. I want to work with you and your educators to lift them up, to honor the work they do, and to let them know they are not in this alone. Let's get together. Let's have a conversation. Let's get your teachers back on that road to awesome, to find that love, to find that clarity, and to walk in their purpose. Reach out to us at roadtoawesome.net for your opportunity to bring Road to Awesome to your school. So much in there that I loved. And, one of the pieces that I'm just going to touch on, and I don't want to loop back to it, but it was something that really stood out to me and I wrote it down, that we've certainly moved past the point where we're doing, virtual instruction, unless students have chosen to do virtual instruction. But you talked about in there that a lot of kids don't want to jump on Zoom for, whether it's therapy or whatever the case may be, just simply because of maybe an embarrassment of, I don't want anybody to see where I live. I don't want people to see, what my home looks like, whether that's my room, my, kitchen table, whatever that might be. And again, it's not something I want to chase, but it is something that I wanted to just bring back up, because I think sometimes, certainly during that window of time when we were doing so much and basically all of our instruction was virtual, and there was this continued, teachers, you got to get them to turn the cameras on and the mute buttons off. There's so much more to that than just simply that kids have checked out. I guess that's really where I want to go with this. It's a big challenge in education right now, and now having kids back in to classrooms, and that's been the norm now for a while, but I hear it all the time, as I'm going around, whether I'm speaking in a school, I'm coaching in a school, whatever the case may be, that so many kids are still, the camera's off and the mute button's on. They might be in the room, but that is their mode. Maybe I don't even know what my question is here, but I just think that was super powerful, and I want to just lob it across to you and let you run with that.
I mean, that deeply resonates. The first time we went into a school, last year, I remember there was these kids with really long hair, like covering their eyes, hoodies up, headphones in, and like hoodies zipped up so you can even see their face, right? So
yeah.
It's really just like social armor, right? You're just like, hey, I'm protecting myself. This is like my cocoon. And, I think back to COVID, and so much of what we lost during that time was that like social connection and like being isolated. Even if you were going to school in some way, there's still so much like fear of other people. That's showing up all the time, right? Like kids come in because they don't know how to make small talk and like talk to someone at lunch to make friends. And a lot of our workforce is dependent on working together, and teamwork is such a key, like that collaboration is so key to success. And we, like, a lot of kids haven't learned those skills yet. So it's really hard. You're totally right. It's not that they're checked out or that they don't care. It's like, a kid got assigned a group project and they were hyperventilating because they had to work with other people. Like it's just like really, really deep fears. It doesn't mean that they're not academically motivated. It doesn't mean, it just means that they're, it's not a muscle that they've exercised. So we have to help them bridge those gaps.
I love that. I think another piece here. So I'm going to put my superintendent hat on. Or actually better, I'm going to go even better. I'm going to put on my high school principal hat. And we are trying like crazy to keep our kids with their phones put away. There are, districts around the country who have gone to these like fancy cell phone lockbox kind of mechanisms where, they're out of sight, out of mind. And if I were one of those, I might push back on you right now, Maria, and say, so you're telling me that you have a program that is going to allow kids to have essentially someone to support them, but I don't want them to have their phones available during the school day. Push back against me on that. Tell me why I'm wrong there.
Hey, a lot of the schools we work with have those policies. And yep, they do. So we work with schools to figure out, hey, you have a point of view here. We respect that. What are the ways that we can support kids that fit within that model? So we have a web app. It's not just an iOS or Android app, right? A lot of teachers will go through their lesson, and then once they're done, they're like, oh, go on your Chromebook and like chat with a coach. So we'll get, flurries of kids coming in. They're like, hey, my teacher said I could come in. We're like, wonderful, let's do that. We're also building out mental health lessons. So like we did a really good one for New Year's resolutions because a lot of kids are thinking about, okay, what is my big New Year's resolution? And you realize that, hey, most people don't actually meet their New Year's resolution because you dream so big that it becomes a little overwhelming. So we talk about like, how do we turn that into instead a new day's intention? So instead of making it a year, let's do one day at a time. And one day at a time, you can get a lot further. So and then after that, you go through that experience and you can chat with a coach. So if you have something to chat about, great. If you don't, go on with your day. But it's really about like embedding it into the things that schools are already doing. Some schools have like Clayful corners where kids are struggling. They're not feeling like they can be engaged in class right now. That's okay. Go talk to a coach while you're waiting for the counselor, while you're waiting for for a principal if you get called into the principal office? How might we help like de-escalate in that moment and help you prepare for that conversation in a way that makes the interaction with the principal a lot more smooth? So there's a lot of these like tidbits that where we can support. And I think it's been really exciting to see schools think about like, okay, here's this tool. It's flexible enough to accommodate to the way that we want to use it. And because it has this mobile app component, I, as a counselor, as a principal, as an AP, like I can go home and know that there is a safety net in case something happens, right? And if a kid needs support, I will be escalated to. So it's kind of, becomes almost the best of both worlds, I'd want to say. But I'm biased, of course.
Of course. Well, and, I would tell you, number one, the more we can do to wrap as much support around our kids as we possibly can, I think that's fantastic. And number two, I would tell you the regular listeners of the podcast and those who have read my book are like, wait a minute, Darrin, are you arguing like for putting away cell phones? Because they know that my opinion is let them have them in their hands. I don't see the problem with it. I really don't. If I won't chase that. But I'm sure that there are those who know me well who are like, wait a minute, Darrin, are you like supporting the lock up the cell phone thing? Because that ain't you. It's not me. It really isn't. And the fist bump that you were seeing over here was, man, I love where you went with that answer to that. Because I just think it's so critical that we are able to wrap supports around our kids. We need to do the same thing with our adults right now too. But and a lot of places you talked about the HR piece a little bit, and I might even ask another question on that real quick. But a lot of the HR pieces now, we are able to do more and more of that. Telehealth now has really embraced mental health as much as the physical health side. But to be able to do something with our students, with the work that you guys are doing, I think is really fantastic. Let me loop back now just really quick, because you were in HR during the pandemic. You were doing that work. And I'm sure you saw some things, from that perspective on the adult side. So let me just, if I may, let me just ask you a little something in the adult side of this, because, as leaders in our organizations, especially our educational leaders, yes, we have kids we got to take care of, but one of the most important things we do to take care of our kids is take care of our adults. So I know Clayful is not designed for the adults, but maybe give us some perspective or just some thoughts of what are some things that school leaders can do to take care of those adults, maybe help them understand how Clayful is impacting kids, and then also how can they take care of themselves?
Yeah, I mean, being an ed tech, you meet a lot of former educators, right? A lot of incredible teachers who left the classroom, not because they didn't love it, but because they couldn't do it anymore. And like every time it just like, it broke my heart. And time again, the thing that kept on coming up is, well, I just couldn't support the kids the way they needed it. And so much secondhand trauma, so much of these like amazing humans who care deeply, carry so much empathy, and they get completely burned out, not from the actual teaching, but from carrying all of this weight of the students' experiences, especially in areas with, where there's food insecurity, housing insecurity. It's really, really hard. So I would argue that like the best teachers I've met they were incredible teachers because they care so deeply, and they had to leave because they care so deeply. So when Melissa, who's my co-founder, like that's her story. And she was a teacher and an administrator, and she had to leave when she had her kids because she's just like, I can't give them what they need anymore. And that's what brings her to this work, because she really feels that like by sort of taking on some of that load, if you will, from teachers, where we can support them to stay in the classroom longer. And, that's definitely a dream. I think beyond that, a lot of teachers will, one of our core tenets is like, if you listen to kids, they'll tell you what they need.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I feel like teachers do the same thing, right? If you listen to them, they'll tell you what they need. And how can we, as a community and as a society, like really listen to teachers now? I mean, we say that they're superheroes and that they're amazing and the incredible work that they're doing, but we don't always put our, whether it's money or resources, where our mouth is. So like, how can we better support them and like really show how much they actually matter, because they do, right? I mean, you now see some of these stats on teacher turnover, and it's not good news, right? So many teachers leaving, the lack of people going into the space. So that's something too that I'm excited about too, because as we start getting coaches excited about supporting kids, many of them are former educators. Maybe they'll go into the classroom, or maybe they'll like, get to your point about like when you talk to kids and when you get that like, feel good feeling again, like maybe we can provide that too, and help drive some people into schools. So yeah, lots of work to do there. But I do think it can make a big impact.
Well, I think I really appreciate that response, because listening is such a critical thing right now for our leaders to be doing. I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but I remember going through the pandemic as a superintendent. Prior to that, anytime if somebody had said to me, whether I was an AP, a principal, or a superintendent, you just don't know what it's like in the classroom. Not true. I spent 11 years in the classroom. I was a middle school teacher. I was a high school teacher. As a superintendent, you just don't get it as a principal. Yeah, I did. I was at 11 years. I was a high school administrator. I get it. But as soon as the pandemic came, this is when like all of that went out the door, because I don't have the schema. I cannot say that I know what it's like to teach in or post-pandemic. It's a completely different world. I can't say that I understand that. I mean, I can empathize. I really can, but it's such a different world right now. And the most important thing our leaders can do is to listen to their teachers, because you are absolutely right. I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but I'm kind of not. I'm taking them and putting them together. Empathy exhaustion is real. Mm-hmm. It is real, and it is the primary cause for burnout. It's not just simply, man, I'm tired. That empathy exhaustion is a whole nother level. And I love that the work that you are leading with your company is giving some schools and some districts the opportunity to maybe take a little bit of that load of empathy off of some of the teachers, because there's another resource available to them. So really quick, before we go to our last question, let my listeners know, how do they get in touch with you? How do they learn more about Clayful? What are the steps they need to take?
Yeah. So, I mean, my inbox is open. I'm just Maria at clayfulhealth.com. So anyone wants to chat, like we love chatting, as you can imagine, because we're talking to people all the time, talking to kids all the time. But I'm just so intrigued to hear about people's experience and how they're addressing this problem. So like anyone who wants to talk about student mental health or mental health in general, reach out for sure. We have a couple pilots or a couple pilot spots that we're holding actually for your listeners. So we created awesome. A little landing page that's clayful.co/leadership. So, and we'll put that in the show notes too, so that you all can go in and just put in your name, and then we'll schedule a time to chat. Because I think that there's so much that we can learn from each other, and finding leaders who prioritize mental health and are thinking about not just how to address the crisis today and the higher acuity needs that exist today, but also how do we work with real prevention solutions to not have it keep getting worse. Like doing both in parallel is really, really important. So anyone wants to chat, let me know.
I love it. I think, what you guys are building, and I appreciate that there's a landing page for my listeners to go and jump on and check it out. You're not just building a company. I mean, you're really building something that is about solving problems and helping to prevent tragedies and helping to take care of our kids and ultimately take care of our educators. So thank you for that very, very much. So Maria, here we go. Last question on the podcast, same one I ask everybody. And that is, this is the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. So Maria, what are you doing right now to lean into leadership?
Great question. I had no idea it was coming. There's two things I thought about. One is I'm such a believer in helping, in this case, kids, but also like our team members build capacity, right? And like helping sort of ask the right questions to have them make the right decisions. And how do we set like the right constraints and the right values so that everyone can be as autonomous as possible and make the right decisions. So like that, and that's the same thing that's literally the work that we do with kids on a day-to-day basis. It's like help them frame questions and frame their life in a way that helps them make the right decision when they need to. So I think like that's one of my primary roles as a leader. And it's, you know, something I continue to do every day because I'm also a perfectionist and a control freak. So, you know, you gotta, you balance both out. So that's one. And then the other one, it's actually came up in our pre-show conversation, but it's really leaning into experts. And it's recognizing like, hey, I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to know everything. I can't be an expert in every single thing. But what I can do is build a really incredible network of people that I can go to ask questions and to help us build the best possible solution. So we lean a lot into the experts in our network and are always looking for more. So that's another reason to email me if you want to chat. Because I think like so often you're like, oh, I need to know everything. It's like, no, you just need to be able to ask the right questions to the people around you. So
that's perfect. And to me, that is what leadership is right there. When we don't feel like we have to be the person who solves every problem for everybody, but rather we're the person who is out there making the connections between experts who can help us collectively solve a problem. That to me is great leadership. Maria Barrera, thank you so much for being with me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast.
Thank you so much.
Such a cool conversation with Maria. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to meet her. And I'm going to be honest with you, I truly believe in the work that Maria and the crew over at Clayful are doing. So make sure you get over there, check them out. Honestly, there's a link in the show notes for you. Clayful is going to save some pilot spots for the Leaning Into Leadership podcast community. So just go hit the link that's in there. It's clayful.co/leadership. It's an opportunity to get in on the pilot with the work they're doing. You know what? We owe it to our kids to come up with anything we can to help them to really build the skills they need, the resilience that they need to tackle the challenges that come their way. Again, Maria, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for the work you are doing on behalf of kids. And now it's time for a pep talk. Earlier this week, folks, my Jeep rolled 100,000 miles. I know, that's a weird place to start a pep talk, right? But here's the thing. It's got me thinking about consistency. It's got me thinking about sticking with what works. So often we find the new flashy thing in education, whether that's we're going to replace a leader with another leader for whatever reason, or we're going to try a new initiative, or we're going to try something else at the sake of what's consistent and what's working. We don't always have to go get something new. We don't always have to make a change. You know, I've got a really good friend, and he drives a Jeep as well. And one of the first things he said when I texted him about the 100,000 miles is, whoop, time to go get a new one. No, it's not. I mean, my Jeep's just as beautiful now as it was when I drove off the lot. I don't need a new one right now because it works. It's consistent. I can count on it. If I couldn't count on it, if it was no longer functioning well, if it was going to cost more to repair than it would be to replace, then that would make perfect sense. But there's nothing wrong. In fact, I'm still as in love with my Jeep today as I was the day I drove it off the lot. Sometimes in education, we get blinded by the shiny things. We get so excited about something else, about another potential thing we could do, that we forget about what's working now. As you start thinking about next year, as you start looking at professional development, as you start thinking about initiatives, take an inventory of what you have now. Think about what works, what is consistent, what is making a difference, and what does not need to be replaced. Before making a move and getting something else, ask yourself, is this going to support or is this going to hinder something we're already doing really well? There is nothing wrong with consistency. All right, my friends, get out there, have yourselves a road to awesome week. We'll catch you next time on Leaning into Leadership. Thank you for listening to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, brought to you by Road to Awesome. Don't forget, click subscribe, give a review, and share this with somebody who might also enjoy leaning into leadership.